you so much for being here. Today is the Calvert Woodley Thanksgiving Wines tasting with cheese, of course. And we're really excited to dive into these wines and to hear from our two awesome hosts tonight. We have Michael Sands, who is the owner of Calvert Woodley. Michael, you can give everyone a wave on the screen. All right. Hi,
hello.
Michael. And
hello.
Hello. And our other host tonight is going to be Tom McKnew. He was the wine buyer here at Calvert Woodley, and he's been with us for many, many years. So we have two really awesome Calvert Woodley, staples here tonight to talk about the wines and their decisions for a good Thanksgiving wine. So with that being said, the first wine we're going to taste is that Viognier. It's the white wine. So go ahead and start with that one if you haven't started with your wines already. And I'm going to turn it over to Michael to kind of talk to us a little bit about the tasting today, a little bit about our catalog season and, Thanksgiving. So I'm excited, and cheers, everyone.
Thank you, Kim. And thank you to everyone who signed up. Takes a little time out of their night to spend with us, so I appreciate it. I see a lot of familiar faces, some familiar names for people that don't have their video on, so thank you so much. As Kim said, I am the owner of Calvert Woodley, as you know, or many of you know. My father was the owner. He retired right before COVID. After 54 years. We've been doing the catalog for a long time. And, one of the things that has, changed through the years is that we've made it a point, an intentional point to make it longer, to make it something that you can actually read and keep, as opposed to just being some wine lists that don't really have a lot of meat to them. We made probably about 10 or 15 years ago, we made a conscious decision to make it something with some stories, with some personal recommendations, with all the things that you see in there. And we've actually we've talked about whether or not we should make it, PDF only, and not print, 104-page catalog. We actually end up mailing out quite a few thousand of them every year, and so it takes a lot of paper. And we've thought about it, but I don't know. I've always decided that I think there's something special about getting a catalog in the mail, something that you can't necessarily enjoy quite the same if you have a PDF. And I do plenty of online shopping. I like online stuff, but I think there's something nice about having the paper in your hand. And so I think for the foreseeable future, we'll probably continue that. So I hope you enjoy it. I heard Kim say that we are longtime staples of Calvert Woodley. I've been at Calvert Woodley for 23 years, and when I started, Tom already had about 18 years on me. So Tom predates the merger of Calvert and Woodley in 1982. He was actually at my dad's store, which was Woodley. Which was down the street, I'm looking down the street as if I can see it. It's down across from the Uptown Theater, if some of you remember that store. So we are very lucky to have Tom. When I started in 98, I literally knew nothing about wine. Everyone thinks that since I grew up, with my dad, that we all somehow magically knew wine. We didn't. My dad worked a lot back in the day, and we didn't actually drink wine. He wasn't even home for dinner most nights. So I would say that in the first, I'm still learning from Tom on a weekly basis, to be honest, but in the first 5 years when I really started to learn a lot about wine, I would say I learned about 75% of it from Tom. He's a super knowledgeable guy. He's good at explaining it. He's good at, making you understand it in ways that are not super technical. He's a valuable resource and a great guy. So I'm happy to continue the tasting by introducing you to Tom.
Hi, thank you, Michael. It's a pleasure to be here. And basically for Thanksgiving wines that we're presenting here, I sort of look for wines that are fun to drink, wines that you really don't have to think about, that are just sort of glide down the throat. And, Thanksgiving sometimes is about just getting together with relatives, and the conversation that you have catching up is you're really not thinking about too much other than what people are saying. So I kind of chose wines that are not really deep in flavor, that are not real complex, that have a lot of fruit forward to them. The Viognier has a really nice tropical aspect to it, and it is a non-oaked wine. I also am not real positive with oak wines in Thanksgiving. And when I'm talking about typical Thanksgiving fare, just the turkey, the sweet potatoes, and the mashed potatoes, the gravy, whatever, cranberries. I'm just looking for something to really slide down the throat and not something to really ponder. Anyway, the first wine that we're trying is definitely not an oak age wine. It's something that's all tank in stainless steel. We've been carrying this Viognier for many years. In fact, earlier this year, we did an email on it. We did very well with it. And we were able to get in another shipment. The wine is, like I said, it's very fruit forward. There is this white peach, a little bit of mango, tropical aspect to it. And it's very round, but it has good acidity, which I think you need a wine that has some acidity to really cut through some of the food you're having. One wine I don't like is like big oaky Chardonnays. I don't think that they certainly have their place, but not maybe at this meal. But another thing I think about at Thanksgiving, sometimes you don't always have to serve what some people think is appropriate. If you really like a Cabernet Sauvignon, or you really want a Bordeaux, and that's your drink, go ahead and have it. I mean, why be, so proper? But personally, I prefer rounder, more supple wines. I do a lot of Beaujolais. I'm partial to Pinot Noirs too. In fact, my first choice was a Pinot Noir from Oregon, but the quantity wasn't there, so I decided to do something else, and I went with a Gamay. The second wine is a Gamay from the Beaujolais area. But anyway, getting back to the Viognier, it is an easy drinker. It's not real complex, but it gives you a very nice fruit forward style to it. And it has a very clean aftertaste, and there's good acidity to it. So I think it's a good first wine to start. Of course, at Thanksgiving, you don't have to serve like 3 different wines. You can serve the white throughout if you want. I find if you have more than 4 or 5 people there, sometimes you want to put a red and white because not everybody enjoys the same thing. So again, round, supple wines, wines that just glide down the throat, wines, especially reds without tannin. I'm not partial to tannin with turkey, if that's what you're having. And I am, again, the theme is sort of fun and not necessarily, a wine that you have to think and ponder about, like an old Bordeaux or something. So anyway, that's kind of where I am with that. And I think the Viognier is a good first starter wine.
Absolutely, Tom. Oh, Go ahead, Michael. I know you had some about
I was
this
going to
one.
say, I agree. I like this wine a lot. Sometimes white Côte de Rhône can have a little bit of a, well, depending on which one, but sometimes it can be a little austere, but this one is unusual in that it's 100% Viognier. So it does, as Tom mentioned, have that kind of tropical, rich, almost honeyed, like without being sweet, kind of quality to it. And I do want to piggyback or reiterate on what Tom said. I'm a big proponent, and it's probably because I, grew up in the wine business under Tom. Drink what you like. I think that is very important. And, everyone can tell you what their Thanksgiving pick is or what their, I go to a lot of wine dinners and they say, oh, this is the perfect match for this. And, it's like, and if you like chocolate milk with your turkey, then drink chocolate milk. It doesn't have to go, I think that a Cabernet or a Bordeaux can sometimes not be the best match, but if that's what you want to drink and that's what you like, drink it, go for it, and don't worry about what anyone says. Just drink what you like and have fun. And Tom has an expression that we use a lot around here, and that is cheap and cheerful. And sometimes, we taste a lot of wines. As you know, we have a lot of, whether it's Petit Chateau or, little South of France wines. Sometimes a wine might only cost a few euros and it might sell for less than $10, but it doesn't have to be analyzed and overanalyzed. It's just cheap and cheerful. And that's a lot of time, these are the wines that are good with Thanksgiving. There's so many flavors and there's so many, there's dry, there's sweet, and it's not even necessarily like a traditional dinner where the sweet is at the end with dessert. I mean, there's the sweet potatoes, the candied yams, the cranberry sauce. There's really a lot of rules that are probably broken on Thanksgiving with the order of which the wine might be drunk, but just don't overthink it and just drink what you like and have fun with it.
I love that. I love that as a sentiment because it's so easy to get wrapped up in like, what should I have? What's the best? And like, it all boils down to what you really enjoy. And so, with tonight's tasting, we're sharing some of our favorites at Calvert Woodley with Thanksgiving, but, it's up to you to really decide what you like best and, what you want to go with for your Thanksgiving dinner. And speaking of Thanksgiving dinner, a question that just came up, Tom, was, if you are having, say more than 4 or 5 guests, how many bottles of wine should you buy for your Thanksgiving dinner to have on hand?
Well, I would probably estimate maybe a liberal guess of maybe half a bottle per person for the whole evening. So half a bottle is about 2.5 glasses. And because there's certainly people who may not have more than a glass, some people may not drink at all, and there will be some people like me who may drink a whole bottle. I would definitely have extra. Sometimes you don't know if people are going to go for the white wine or if they're going to go for the red. I think it's a good idea to serve both, unless you know for a fact that everybody there is only white wine drinkers or something like that. So it's good to know if your guests have a preference in advance on what they like. So I would, if you had 8 people, I'd at least have 4 bottles of wine and maybe 6 with the idea of not really opening up a couple bottles. So it's hard to know exactly. I wouldn't be opening up all the bottles in advance either. So you just have to play it by ear and see how people are imbibing.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it's not a bad thing to have leftovers, because then there's that leftover Thanksgiving, turkey and stuff that you always have left over. And so it's perfect to have some extra wine for that. I love it. Well, speaking of food too, I also want to point out the cheese pairing with this one. So I can see some people snacking on the screen here. And the cheese pairing for the Viognier is the Campo de Montalban cheese. It's a Spanish cheese. But was hand selected by our La Cheeserie, of course, for this tasting. And it's an interesting cheese because it appears very similar to Manchego, especially if you're looking at the rind. It's got that kind of diamond pattern. It's brown on the rind. And so it can often be mistaken for that. But it's actually a special version of this type of cheese. It's actually a blend. So you will find some mixed milk cheeses in different cheese, producing areas around the world. And this is one of those. So this is about 60% cow's milk, with the remainder being goat's and sheep's milk in the cheese. So it just makes for a slightly different version of Manchego. It's made in an area that's similar to that. So it's in the town of La Puebla de Montalban, which translates to the name the Fields of Montalban. So it's kind of why we have this cheese kind of linking itself to a location. And in terms of tasting notes, this one often comes across mildly buttery. There's usually, just similar to Manchego, some kind of nutty sort of flavors, maybe a little bit of that saltiness in there, but and with that, having a really nice acidity in a wine or in food also makes this a nice pairing with the cheese. So the cheese likes to have a little bit of acidity. So I feel like that is sort of why the Viognier was the pairing for this one. But I'm curious from you all, Michael and Tom, and if anyone else wants to, write in the chat about this, what do you think about this pairing?
I personally like it. I'm a big fan of Manchego, and actually when I saw it on my plate, I actually thought it was Manchego, but that's because I probably didn't read the pre-Zoom email closely enough. I apologize, but no, it's really good, and it's it's a great match.
Yeah, I like it as well. It seems to me this cheese maybe a little less salty than Manchego. I don't know if you feel that way.
I do.
Be nice if you had them side by side, but I think it coexists with the wine very nicely. I find it really rare when you have just a great match with wine and cheese. I think one of my favorites is like Sancerre and goat cheese, or champagne and goat cheese. Sometimes when you have that kind of a combination, it just wows. It just pops right out. But this is good. Sometimes you can get a cheese that can be so salty it can just destroy the wine, or sometimes you can get a cheese that will make a wine appear sweet. So it's not an easy thing to match the wine and cheese together. It really takes a lot of practice, and I'm not sure. I can recognize good matches, but it's you got to work at it to understand the different flavors. One cheese I've always had a little difficulty with is Emmentaler, with a nuttiness. Sometimes it can do funny things to different wines. But anyway, I think this is a good match, and I think everything's in balance.
Balance. I was just going to say balance is the key to almost all pairings. You don't want it to be overpowered.
Yeah. And I think that note about overpowering and trying to be in balance is a really good transition into that red wine. Because I know that this red wine was chosen because it's a little bit on the lighter side. It's not going to overpower your turkey and your dishes. So, with that, let's go over to that red wine. So go ahead and pour yourself a little bit of that one. That's going to be, it's the Gamay, and I'm going to hand it over to Tom to talk about it. I can see him pouring his glass now. But yeah, this is a really fun one, I think, to have around Thanksgiving. I know that, like, personally for my family, they are always looking for wines that aren't too heavy. They like kind of the lighter style, maybe even a little bit of sweetness. And so, a red like this would be something that would really please them. And I think it's a good overall crowd pleaser. So, Tom, what can you tell us about this one? And, maybe the tasting notes, why does it pair so well with Thanksgiving?
Sure. It's from one of my favorite Beaujolais producers. Marcel Lapierre is the estate. This wine, we do carry as Morgon in the store. We get maybe limited to 10 cases a year, and it's $40+, and it's, I think, one of the best Beaujolais year in, year out. That wine would require a bit more aging. However, he makes from younger vines, and this is all 100% Gamay from Morgon. We can't call it Morgon because I think the vines have to be a certain age, but it produces a very light, soft, and very fruity and lower alcohol, because the younger vines don't really produce high alcohol, at least in their early years. But anyway, it's sort of in the cheap and cheerful, well, I wouldn't say cheap, but it's kind of mid-range, but it's very easy to drink. It's a wine you can really, slosh right down and not even think about it, because the balance is very nice. It's more on the red fruit side. And I like Gamay as a grape variety with turkey, especially if you have cranberries in there, because I think that the two red fruits just really hit it off with each other. But very little tannin in this wine, so it gives you a little more of a silkier aspect. But it's just I like the freshness of it. This is a wine I would be drinking over the next year and a half, but probably not further into that, because the charm is really in the young fruit. This is actually a pretty good red wine for white wine drinkers. There's a lot of people who just don't like the heaviness and the tannin that is in certain red wines, but this actually, sometimes you can, if you chill it just slightly, you can close your eyes. It's almost like a white wine, but it does, and slightly chilled, I think is the best way to serve it. But anyway, it is 100% Gamay. Drink it, over the next a year or two. This is another wine that usually at the end of the year we run out, and that's it, because there's limited production on this. But the Morgon is a little richer, a little stronger. It would really require maybe a little more aging to really serve with, for dinner. But Gamay is kind of one of my fun grape varieties. To really, and it goes well with a lot of different foods. You can serve it with, show the bottle. That's what I'm supposed to do. Anyway, that's what we're drinking. And Gamay is just an easy, charming grape variety. Never real deep or complex. It does resemble, in a way, a Pinot Noir, in that it sort of, the way it fits in the mouth, that it's very round in nature. On the other end of the spectrum is Cabernet, that's dense and tannic, or maybe Syrah. But anyway, it's a fun, chillable red that I think with lighter meats, chicken would be great. I mean, it's also Beaujolais are great with pastas and things like that. They're all-purpose reds. But Pinot Noirs, if you want to go maybe a little more upscale, I would probably send you in that direction. There's plenty of good American Pinot Noirs or good French Burgundies that would work well. I don't think I'd be spending, $200 for a Grand Cru Burgundy. I think you might waste it on the meal, to tell you the truth, if it's typical Thanksgiving fare, because people are, they aren't really thinking about the wine. I think it's a good, thing to just sort of just wash the food down, and it's all about conversation and people getting together, and the wine usually takes a back seat, just so long as it doesn't stand out as too acidic or too austere. It'll do its job.
Michael, how are you feeling about this one?
Excuse me. I feel good about it. I bring home, or I used to before my my dad moved to Florida, and I no longer bring wine home for Thanksgiving. Excuse me. I guess everybody's Thanksgiving dinner used to be maybe a little bit bigger pre-COVID, but when you talk about a crowd pleaser, this is definitely one of them. And Beaujolais, and there's a reason that, George Duboff made Beaujolais and Beaujolais Nouveau, a household name in America, and there's a reason that it is so often recommended with Thanksgiving, because it goes very well, and it's easy to drink, and it's not overpowering. And when you have, or maybe we don't have it anymore, but when you have 10, 15, 20 or more people, it's a wine that almost everybody can enjoy. Like Tom said, even people that don't really like red wine because they say it could be too astringent or too tannic or whatever. These are really, really good wines to drink, and it's easy to drink. But I really like the cheese that goes with it too, personally speaking. But when you talk about, people talk about, what's the best wine to have? There's no best wine. There's technical matches, technical pairings, based on, the course that you're having. Sometimes you do a 3 or 4 or 5 course wine dinner, and each course can match with a different, wine, of course. But, as Tom said, it's just about the conversation. Sometimes the wine needs to stay in the background and just be something that you can have and enjoy, and not have it be the focus. So something like this, which is easy drinking, yet still very flavorful and has good quality, is a great choice.
Yes, and I saw some questions in the chat here about the cheese, and so it is the Port Salut. That is our second cheese that pairs with this wine. And Port Salut is it's a pretty historic cheese. It comes from Brittany in the Loire Valley in France, and it's a semi-soft cheese made from pasteurized cow's milk, and was actually produced originally by Trappist monks in the 19th century. So it's been made for quite some time, I guess, like most cheeses. And it's known to be just very creamy and smooth and pretty mellow. So it's not a super pungent, soft cheese. Sometimes you can have some bries that are quite pungent or what have you. But Port Salut tends to be a little more on the mellow side. It also has some good acidity, which kind of breaks up the creaminess of the cheese. And I think that, the softness of it and, that just delicate flavor is what is really nice with the Gamay, because you have that lovely fruit. And then with this nice soft cheese, it's a fun pairing to have. So I'm curious from our attendees here, is there anyone that has any questions so far for either Michael or Tom? Feel free to write in the chat, or you may also unmute. Checking to see. Everyone's enjoying their wines and cheese. This is great. Well, I do have one question, and that's for Tom. And Tom, how do you go about deciding what wines come into Calvert-Woodley? You try tons of wines every week, and I'm just curious, what is it that, you're kind of looking for?
Well, I'm looking, and we do taste an awful lot of wine. I'm looking for balance mostly. Wines that are not austere in any way, shape, or form, wines that aren't too acidic, too tannic. It's all about balance and fruit. Wine has to have, a lot of fruit to really just make everything slide down. We taste a lot of Bordeaux here, and that's a little difficult to taste a lot of young Bordeaux. And over the last couple of years, we've been tasting a lot of 2018s and 2019s, 2 really, really good years. In fact, 2000 is a super year too. So an embarrassment of riches on the Bordeaux front. But the real work is not really tasting Pichon Lalande or Lafite Rothschild, not that they would send us a sample, but it's really, the little chateaus that and you need to taste them just as soon as they're in the bottle to make your decision. So you're tasting a lot of young grapey wines, but at that point, you really need to look for balance. You need to really smell something in the nose that tells you this wine is complex. And you want something that's just not too dry in the aftertaste, it's not too tannic to keep the wine just flowing. So sometimes wines are very abrupt and dry in the aftertaste. And certainly that when you taste one of those, you look, keep on looking. So we do taste an awful lot of wines here, but the key is balance. And one other thing that we use with wine, of course, you can't taste everything, and wines are coming out every day, hundreds of wines. So we do rely on a lot of wine publications that we trust, and there's maybe 4 or 5 that we find are good, and each publication has its own, they have their own ideas of what is a really good wine. So each taster is different, and you have to gauge what they're actually saying when they say this wine is going to be ready in 5 years. Maybe to your taste, it's going to take 20 years. I don't know. So we almost have to look between the lines when you're reading these reviews, and that's the other way we have a buying. We have to go by good published reviews that we trust, because you just can't taste everything, and especially wines that are $50 and $100. Nobody's going to send you those samples, and you can't open up 100 of those wines out of your own stock every day. But there's you pretty much in the price range of under 20 is the real challenge, because there can be a lot of so-so wines in that price range. Once you get over $20, usually the wine will be pretty good, but may not be worth the money. So it's a challenge, but again, to me, the most important thing is just having a wine that's balanced and doesn't, have a flaw of too much tannin, too much acidity. If you read about a particular wine vintage, you know that they didn't have a lot of sunshine. You got to be careful for high acid wines that just may just tear your stomach out. And then the opposite of that is in a real hot vintage, where there's no acidity to the wines, and they're flabby. That can happen anywhere now. Global warming is out there. So you've got to understand that the vintage that is being presented to you, and look for the flaws, and then go for the best things that are balanced and have actually good fruit that is true to type. A Cabernet should taste like a Cabernet. It shouldn't taste like a dill or something, a green element, green beans or something. So it could tell you it's unripe. So it's a challenge, and that's what I really enjoy about this job is really just, finding good balanced wines that I know, the customers will respond to. And again, the biggest thrill is when you find something you bought 50 or 100 cases and it goes out the door in 5 minutes. Then it gives you a really good feeling that you're on the right path. So anyway, that's sort of how we try and taste. And it's not just me. I taste with Michael quite a bit, especially in the Bordeaux, and with Jen, who also works here. So it's nice to have, and the wine staff, there's people in the wine staff who have their own tastes. And if they're looking to, if they like recommending wines that are in a certain style, and if I can find a wine that's what they're looking for, I can tell them, here, try this, tell me what you think. And if they go for it, then I'll certainly jump in with both feet and try and, the people on the floor are very important, and they have their own taste too. I kind of support that when I'm tasting wines.
If I could throw in a few words, I would say that one of the things that Tom said that I agree with very much is that, he's big on and tasting a wine that is true to type, as he said. A Bordeaux that tastes like a Bordeaux, a Rhône wine that tastes like a Rhône wine. Tom has such an amazing palate and amazing knowledge and amazing memory. Sometimes we talk about stuff and he says, oh yeah, this reminds me of this wine that we tasted 11 years ago. It's amazing. So he has a great recollection for a lot of the wines that he's tasted, and it does help to know that you're tasting, because we get a lot of samples sent to us. And sometimes you say, wow, it's impressive. Sometimes a wine can be big and bold and, it's great to sample. And then you say, well, this isn't really what Oregon Pinot Noir tastes like. This is just like I don't know, like a monster kind of wine where it like almost puts hair on your chest. It's ridiculous. But some of the wines, are so big and rich and overpowering. But, as Tom said, balance. But one of the most important things, or an important thing to us, I can't say it's the most important, but it's important, is what we call, or what they call, QPR, quality price ratio. When you find a good wine that a lot of times you don't want to taste the wine thinking like, okay, I know that this is a $50 wine or a $100 wine, because you want to taste it, not necessarily blind, but that does actually help a lot. But when you taste a wine and you don't really know what it costs, and you say, oh, wow, I like this wine. And then you say, oh, okay, it's going to have to sell for $25. Okay, yeah, it's a good wine for $25. There's a lot of good wines that when you find out what it would have to sell for, you say, yeah, we'll pass, because it might not be worth it. It might be a good wine to taste, but it might not be worth it. And, obviously when you can taste a wine and you think that this would be a great wine to sell for $25, and then you find out you can sell it for $15, you say, great, we'll take, 50 or 100 cases, because this is better than, it punches above its weight class, as we say sometimes. So, the price matters, obviously. I mean, we're not, trying to, we're not selling $100 bottles of wine every 10 minutes. It's, maybe the average of what we sell. I don't know if you find this interesting. I actually just ran a report yesterday and looked at our catalog sales since the catalog started around Columbus Day, so it's been exactly a month. The average bottle of wine sold at Calvert Woodley in the last month is $19 a bottle. So, we buy a lot of what we call value wines, and value wines are important because, yes, it'd be great to drink first growth Bordeaux, but it's unrealistic that that's what most people are buying. So, we go for QPR, quality price ratio, good balanced wines that sell for a reasonable price.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, there are some other questions in the chat here, and one of those is Larry was wondering, have you heard, or are you using wine in any of the dishes that you're making for Thanksgiving? Either Tom or Michael, either of you can jump on this one. And what wines would you use for that? Now, I personally don't know if I've used wine in any, I don't think I've used wine in any Thanksgiving dishes, but if you were to add wine to a dish, what would it be, and what wine?
I will leave that to someone who actually cooks Thanksgiving dinner. So I'll let Tom answer that question.
I don't cook, but I could see you adding a little wine to possibly the cranberry sauce. I've seen it done before in very small amounts, and possibly gravy as well. But I would consider a white wine certainly for that, because I'm trying to think of where else you would use it. Maybe a real cook could answer that.
Yeah, this is a question for Ben Giliberti, and he has a whole article about that actually in the catalog. So if you have the catalog or you're on our website, there's a whole Cooking with Ben, or Cooking with Wine with Ben article you guys can check out. It's good. But yeah, no, I haven't heard of the cranberry sauce, but I feel like that would be really nice to kind of cut the sweetness of the cranberry sauce, to add a little wine in there. All right. And we're about to get into our sparkling. So there is a question that sort of pertains to all three wines that I'll ask. And it's pretty easy one. This is something that we can, kind of come back to too. But the question is, what is the correct temperature to serve each of the wines? And hopefully everyone's chilled their sparkling. But yeah, let's start with the Viognier.
Viognier, I would
answer, yes.
Are you speaking, Michael?
No, I was going to say I'll let Tom answer.
Okay,
Yeah.
certainly. I don't think refrigerator cold would be appropriate for that. Actually, the temperature it's at right now, which has maybe been open 20 minutes, to me would be the ideal temperature. A well-balanced and wine without flaws will be able to take a warmer temperature. Great white Burgundies, you almost serve at room temperature. This Viognier, as it warms up, you get a little more of that bouquet, that tropical aspect. And I would say, on this one, I would take it out of the refrigerator for maybe 15 to 20 minutes and let it just warm up a teeny bit. And the Gamay, the Beaujolais that we had, I'm kind of thinking in the refrigerator for 10 minutes, maybe 15 minutes max. Or if you have a cool basement, that would be the ideal temperature.
Yeah, I would say as a general rule of thumb, I find that a lot of people serve their white wines too cold and their red wines too warm. For what it's worth.
Okay.
Yeah, I feel that I know that I've heard that the typical temperature for a red could fall in between like 55 to 65 degrees Fahrenheit. It sort of depends on, if it's a bolder, heavier red wine, it's going to be close to that 65. And if it's something like this Gamay that could have a little more chill to it, down towards that 55 degrees is also is sort of that end of the spectrum. So, yeah. And then what about this sparkling here, Tom? I know you're just pouring your sparkling. This one, would this be well chilled, or, what's your thought for this one?
I would serve it pretty well chilled. And the fun part about this is I don't know much about the estate, but I found reading about Bugey was very interesting because it comes from the foothills of the Jura Mountains. And it too is made up 95% of Gamay. I didn't realize that when I originally tasted it. I didn't think I was going to have two Gamays here, but it just was an accident. But anyway, Bugey is actually the appellation. Cerdon is actually the vineyard designation. Again, 95% Gamay. It's made in a process called Méthode Ancestrale, which Crémant, Limoux, and Claret de Die are also made that way. It's not like a secondary fermentation like the Champagne method, and quite often can leave residual sugar in the wine, like this one has. But I think, again, this is really fun, and this is something that I think is great with the desserts that go around Thanksgiving. And it's not just pumpkin pie, but it's also pecan pie, and it can be a lot of things, actually. But this is just, and one other aspect I like about this is the alcohol. It's about 8%, and sort of at the end of the evening, you don't want something real alcoholic. You're getting kind of full, and actually the bubbles on this isn't quite as they aren't quite as there's the pressure in this is not quite like a champagne, so it's a little less bubbly too. But I find the wine really charming, and something, again, you can just sort of quaff down with dessert and just not even think about it. It just sort of glides down with everything.
Yeah, I find this to be a fun wine.
Yeah, it's fun. This is one of my favorites, I think, that we have at the store in terms of sparkling. That's, I think, like around $20. It's such a good, easy, go-to. And I will say that, and the cheese for this one is the Saint and Angel cheese. And this is a French cheese. It's very luxurious. It's a triple cream cheese. So I don't know how I don't know how it becomes a triple cream cheese, but it is very creamy, as you will see. I'm sure by this point now, It's been warming up to room temperature, so it's probably starting to get very melty, which I think is the best part about this one. And the name actually comes from just kind of the idea that when this cheese was, kind of first came out, people thought it was like cheese from the gods. So calling it the Saint Angel cheese really was appropriate. And the thing about it that really, I think, pairs well with the sparkling is that it's like it has a texture of like this like whipped cream and whipped butter. So it's like very, very creamy. It's something you could even spread on a cracker. And anytime you have something so mouth coating like that, the textures of the sparkling wine and the bubbles on your palate kind of break up the cheese and creates a really nice, like dynamic sort of feeling on your tongue, which is, I think that's what makes this wine and cheese pairing kind of fun and like a good textural thing. And we do, so yes, we have, Larry thinks it's a fun wine. So agree, Larry. And then in the chat here, we have some questions about, Wilfred was curious about the sparkling and he said, could you serve this as an aperitif, perhaps even with Aperol added?
I certainly think it could be served as an aperitif, providing the people you're serving it to knows that there's a tiny bit of sweetness to it. And the low alcohol, I also think makes it attractive for before dinner too. I don't think it's too sweet for before dinner. And I served with the right kind of food, or cheese, I think that would be a nice starter too. But I'm a little leaning more toward the dessert end of it. But and Aperol, that would be an interesting thing to experiment with.
Yeah, that would be. Yeah.
All right. So I'm curious. Oh, we have someone come back in here. So there was a few questions in the chat. I'm going to open up the floor if anyone wants to unmute and jump in with a question or wants to ask. Oh, perfect. Wilfred is going to experiment right now. So Wilfred, once you do that, I want to know how the Aperol tastes with it. That'd be amazing. All right, so feel free to unmute and jump in if you have any questions. Yeah, they'll definitely, I have a few too, so don't worry.
Well, if anyone unmutes and wants to ask a question, then by all means cut me off. But if anyone's taking a minute to type a question, I just want to say thank you for all your support. I see a lot of familiar faces. I see, hey, Arlene, I just saw Arlene. Hi, Arlene. I see a lot of familiar faces. I see a lot of familiar names. And when I look at the sign up list of previous tastings, I know we have a lot of loyal followers and loyal customers, and I just want to say thank you, because obviously the last year and a half has been challenging for everybody, and you guys have been very supportive of us, and not just during COVID. Obviously, many of you have been customers for a long time, and we appreciate you very much, and we really do appreciate your support. We think about you more often than you may know. We put together this catalog only once a year, but we actually kind of talk about it all year long. Even now when we have 10 months before we need to start doing the catalog, we might taste a wine or we might think of something and we say, oh, that needs to go in next year's catalog, and or we need to think about this. And we think about staff selections, and we think about articles or producer profiles or people that we think that you might find interesting. I mean, listen, everything that we do is in the hopes that you'll like what we're doing. And if you weren't around to read it, then we wouldn't be printing 60,000 copies of a 104-page catalog. So you guys have, many of you have been supporting us for a long time, and I just want to say that it does not go unnoticed, and we appreciate you very much. So I hope you enjoy the catalog, and we hope you enjoy the work that goes into it. Kim put a lot of work into it. Tom obviously put a lot of work into it, and so does Jen and Ben and a few other people. So we thank you very much.
Cheers! Yes, cheers.
Cheers. I would like to say I thoroughly enjoy the catalog, and it's fabulous. And the cover this year was really beautiful. Very, very nice. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
But the insides too.
Oh, thank you. That was a photo that was actually taken. Kim had a photo shoot a few months ago with some friends of hers, and that's where that picture came from. So thank you to Kim.
Yes, thank you, Kim.
You're welcome. I'm so happy you guys liked it. It was a shoot to get really nice photos of stuff for the catalog, honestly. So it's awesome that you all are loving it. Awesome. Well, there are some other questions here in the chat that I'd love to throw out to Michael and Tom. And so one of the first ones is, let me scroll down. Okay, so right after Thanksgiving is Hanukkah. So do you have any suggestions for the wine and no Manischewitz?
I guess I should answer a Hanukkah question before Tom does. A wine with Hanukkah, that's not necessarily always thought of. I guess it depends what you're having. It always depends what you're having. Something with maybe a little bit of sweetness, like a Cabernet Riesling, a low level sweetness kind of, could be an American Riesling, I guess. But with potato latkes and applesauce, a very low alcohol, low sweetness German Riesling is something that I always like, personally.
Awesome.
I agree with Michael on that. I really haven't experienced too many Hanukkahs, so but I know the food, and if and I've had the latkes, and a Riesling certainly would be nice. It can be semi-dry. I think that would work. And actually a Riesling for Thanksgiving is great too. One great variety I meant to mention was Riesling can be dry or semi-dry. That it works very, very well with Thanksgiving turkey as well.
My grandmother, my dad's mom, made the best, and she passed it down to my sister, who thankfully still makes it. So I'm very appreciative of the people in my family that actually know how to cook. So there you go.
Nice. Awesome.
Kim?
And then, oh, yes.
Kim, there was I think I saw a question about vegetarian.
Yes, vegetarian dishes, a good things like
one of my favorite, and it tends to be more white oriented, but I really like Gruner Veltliner from Austria with any kind of green beans or salads or just in general vegetable dishes. I think Sauvignon Blancs also shine very well with that kind of food. Sometimes it really can depend on if there's any kind of herbs or seasonings that can really dictate with the vegetables what you're doing. If there's a sauce of some kind that's in there, is it salty? Is it sweet? So there's other questions that need to be answered. But just generally speaking, crisp whites can be Sauvignon Blancs from almost anywhere. Gruner Veltliner just really comes to mind because I have it with salads sometimes.
Careful with asparagus. Asparagus can be a tough one to match with.
Yeah, that can be difficult.
Mm-hmm. I'm laughing because Wilfred reported back about the Aperol, and he said, "Don't do it." I think he said that the sparkling wine had a little too much sweetness for the Aperol, which I could see that being sort of a funky flavor. That's why we like to do a Prosecco or something without that sweetness in it. Oh, man. That's too good. All right, everyone. Are there any other questions? Feel free to unmute. We're just coming up on our time. And of course, we can always go a few minutes over if anyone has some lengthy questions, or if you have a comment, we would love to hear. And yeah.
Just appreciation. It has been a wonderful time. And all of our guests, which we do have here, all of them enjoyed the wines.
Oh, good.
Thank you, Arlene.
You are welcome, Michael. Thank you, man.
All righty.
Well, if I don't see any of you in the store before Thanksgiving, I just want to say happy Thanksgiving to everybody, and I hope you get to spend some time with the people that you want to spend time with. It's been a rough couple years for everybody, so I hope you enjoy yourself.
Yes.
Hey, Kim.
Yes.
Yeah, there's I think Paul Friedman had a question.
Yes.
If I read it correctly about the color in wine. I'm not quite sure what the question was, but was he specifically talking about the color in these wines, or if he could just elaborate just quickly on that?
Yeah, I wasn't sure either. Paul, was it about the colors of the wines we're having tonight? I would assume. Let's see if he's going to write back. Or you can unmute too, if that's easier. Let's see. Looks, yes, these wines.
Oh, he's referring to these. Okay, yeah. Well, as far as the color goes, the white is certainly very appropriate. The Gamay, the second red, is one of the lighter reds you'll ever see. And I don't always judge a wine by the color. To me, it's important if it's clear and it's bright. Usually the brightness in a wine will reflect that it has some acidity to it. But I know Gamay is not a strong color grape like Cabernet. And in my assessment, color is there. It's more important if it's clear and it's bright. But there's plenty of very pale Pinot Noirs that can be really exciting wines. So color is way down on the list of things that I really grade a wine by. It's most important part is what you smell in the nose and how the balance is on the palate. So anyway,
there's a lot of wines that could be light in color but still full body and full flavor. So
yeah, but when we assess wine and we're looking for wine to buy, color is not one of the really most important things. But clarity of color is very important. But a Cabernet should not, a Cabernet should not be, light pink. So certainly, it needs to have some deep color to it, like it's supposed to. So yeah, it plays a role, but it's not the most important thing we look for.
Mm. Yeah, and the pink color of that sparkling, that's coming from the grape variety, correct? You said it was also, would you say it was Gamay? Did I hear that correctly?
Yes, it's Gamay, and it's meant to be that color, that sort of almost rusty sort of rosé.
Gotcha. All right, and then Hannah here in the chat wants to know, what is a Pinot Noir that you find exciting?
Excuse me, a Pinot Noir I find exciting. Well, one of the wines I was going to have a Pinot Noir from Oregon, which I think is very affordable. It's called Grand Moraine. It's actually owned by the Kendall Jackson people. I thought for low 30s, I think that's what it is. It was an exciting Pinot Noir. It's a little more complicated than this Gamay, and it probably needs more complicated food. But I think you probably need to get into the $30 range to get something that's exciting. I had a Bourgogne from a good Burgundy producer that's about $39 that I thought was really excellent. It's one of those wines that I could probably drink the whole bottle if I felt like it, and I probably would. But you know, those kind of wines I find exciting, that you just look forward to that second and third glass.
What was the name of that Burgundy one that you just mentioned?
I think we still have it available. It's the Viognier Gravière from Jean-Michel Guillon. It's the Haut.
Oh, is it the Haut? Okay. Yeah, I know.
And I believe if you have our old emails, I believe it was done on an email by Ben Giliberti earlier in the year. But I thought that was a really exciting Burgundy. There's plenty of good Oregon Pinot Noirs coming out in the $30 range. And of course, there's plenty of good wines from California too. So we're lucky to have so many good places that supply such a, you know, good wine.
Absolutely. All righty. Well, with that being said, you know, just want to say, you know, thank you to everyone. Oh my goodness, you guys are coming in with the questions. I love it. For anyone that has to jump off, no worries. I will be sending a follow-up email with any additional details from the tasting. We'll have all of the wines, of course, still available. So you can, you know, if you like them, you can stock up for Thanksgiving. And I'll also be sending the link to the recording as well. It'll probably be today or tomorrow. It sort of depends on how long it takes to download. So just keep an eye out for that. And one more question here. Larry wants to know, will you, he's asking about, will we do this again for Christmas and New Year's with beef on the menu? I like it. I mean, honestly, I don't have beef with Christmas. We just do a turkey, but it would be good to know what kind of wine would be good with a beef dish for, like, you know, roast beef for Christmas. Tom, do you have any thoughts on that one?
Oh, there's hundreds of options. I mean, you can go for roast beef, which if it's typically done in the American fashion, then yes, you can go a lot of directions. Chateauneuf du Pape, Bordeaux is certainly a favorite. Cabernet would shine in that area. We could even go to Argentina and get a really good Malbec. So beef it certainly is very flexible. You know, good sturdy reds would work very well. And you know, I at least once a week I like to have some sort of food in the house that would accommodate something like that. So I can open up a Bordeaux or a Cabernet or a Chateauneuf.
How about Barolo Barbaresco?
Oh yeah, well, like I said, you can go anywhere in the world for that kind of food.
Yeah.
Nice. All righty. Well, if you guys have any other questions, you can always email me. I'll copy Tom and Michael on the email, and you guys can reach out if you have anything else that you want to know. But with that being said, you know, a big thank you from Calvert Woodley for joining us tonight and for your continual support. We really love having, you know, being able to see you. You know, I know we used to do the in-store tastings, and with COVID and stuff, we've been doing virtual. So it means a lot that you're joining us here. And yeah, thank you for being here, and happy Thanksgiving. Cheers.
A happy Thanksgiving.
Yes. Thank you, everybody. Have a great night. And thank you, Tom and Kim.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Good night.
Okay.